Welcome it. For today's meeting, owing to some holiday schedules, we have Councillor O'Sullivan joining by phone. So I'm hopeful, Councillor O'Sullivan, that you can hear us okay. Is that right?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. We can hear you. I understand you're sheltered from the rain. So hopefully...
I am. I'm sitting in my car.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I know that given your role with the International Plowing Match, you haven't had very much time away from North Grenville. So we thank you for joining the meeting this evening from your camping spot. So with that in mind, I'll call the meeting to order. We do have all council colleagues present, and I'll look for someone likely who's with us in the chambers to read the land acknowledgement. Any volunteers this evening? Councillor Barclay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you, Councillor Barclay. Now we'll move to approval of the agenda. Colleagues, you have it before you. For tonight, August 30th, I'll look for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda this evening. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Strachian. Any comments on the agenda this evening as presented? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Sullivan, was that a yay?
Yes, that was a yay.
Thank you very much. And should you want to move something, you're more than welcome to do so. You'll just have to intervene verbally, and I'll try to make sure to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, disclosures of interest. Council colleagues, any disclosures of interest in regards to perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from an item on the agenda this evening? Not seeing anything. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. There aren't any presentations or delegations this evening. There were a number of staff reports, as you're aware. Under the consent agenda, there's just 3 items. Of course, council colleagues, it's our prerogative to adopt these as presented, or any matter under the consent agenda can be removed so that it's not adopted at this time, should further discussion be warranted. So under the consent agenda, we have council meeting minutes from July 5th, 14th, and we do have the planning and development noise exemption bylaw amendment. Colleagues, are you comfortable with the consent agenda as presented? Yes?
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Sullivan, that's a yes?
Yes.
Okay then, I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Sullivan, would you like to move that?
Yes, I will.
Okay. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Barclay. Seeing no discussion, I will call the question. All in favor, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Acknowledge your vote. Every vote here was in the affirmative, so that passes. So now we'll move on to reports, and our first report this evening is on civil marriage services, and I believe our clerk will be giving us that update. Go ahead, Ms. Workman.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, I bring you an update with respect to civil marriage ceremonies and to advise that the service has resumed. Next slide. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing guidelines, many facilities were shut down, resulting in wedding ceremonies to be canceled. The clerk's office did not offer civil marriage ceremonies during the pandemic to help protect the health and safety of staff and the public. Next slide, please. In July, the clerk's office opened training to any municipal staff who was interested in performing civil solemnization. The training was conducted on July 12th through the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario. There are 10 staff certified to conduct marriage ceremonies. Next slide. Members of the public who are looking to hold a civil ceremony are encouraged to contact the clerk's office by phone or email to discuss the requirements and to obtain further information. In order to facilitate scheduling and fulfill the legislative requirements, the clerk's office requests 1 month notice be provided. Ceremonies will be conducted in the Urbandale Arts Center and will be held during regular municipal office hours. Next slide. Staff will also take this time over the next few months to analyze the statistics of marriage licenses and the fee structure in comparison to other local municipalities. Staff anticipate reporting back to council in the new year. Resuming civil ceremonies will provide couples an opportunity to have a small, simple, non-religious ceremony to solemnize their marriage. Next slide. I'm happy to answer any questions and have included the contact details for members of the public with questions and booking inquiries.
Thank you very much, Ms. Workman. Any questions in terms of Councillor Wilson? Go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. Through you, Your Worship. The hours of having these civil ceremonies is only within the municipality hours?
That's correct.
Is there a venue or a way of anybody booking outside of municipal hours for civil ceremonies?
It's definitely a possibility that we can look at in the new year.
Okay.
We will need to establish some additional policies with respect to the safety of staff.
Yeah, because there used to be someone that did that, but no longer. So I just wanted to see if that's possible in the future.
Definitely something we
Thank
can
you.
reevaluate. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? Just quickly, Ms. Workman, is it just one municipal staff that is required to conduct the ceremony? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I understand that a number have been trained now?
Up to 10, yes.
Up to 10. And having fielded a number of requests from couples in the community about my or council's capacity to conduct the marriage or a marriage, can you a civil marriage, of course, can you clarify council's role?
Any member of council would be welcome to perform a reading. The legal aspects would have to be done by the clerk or the clerk designate, which are one of these 10 staff members.
So effectively elected officials are not enabled or allowed to conduct those ceremonies? Is
That's
that correct?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But municipal staff can? Okay. And the other thing is, I know to Councillor Wilson's point, we had someone who was very well recognized in the community who served as our clerk doing these ceremonies for many, many years. Is there a fee structure attached to the conduct of the civil ceremony?
There is. It's included in our fees and charges bylaw, which is something that, again, I look to bring back to council in the new year.
And the standard fee, if one were to come forward this fall, do you recall what the fee would be?
I believe it's 125.
125, okay. And insurance is not required, that would just be a simple fee for the performance of the ceremony?
That's correct.
And the signing of legal documents, I presume?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other colleagues? Any other questions? Councillor Sullivan, you're listening online, have you heard everything?
Yes, I did. It's very difficult to hear. I couldn't hear Councillor Barkley or Councillor Wilson very well. You and Workman are coming through very clearly, but I couldn't hear them not very well. But I certainly heard the responses and the answers very well.
Okay. Certainly what I can do, Councillor Sullivan, if you notice it as we move along, if you need me to summarize a point to the best of my ability, of course, or I can ask council colleagues to speak louder. I think the audio is being streamed through our clerk's computer, so I think the further away you are, the harder it might be to hear. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So just please interrupt us, and we'll try to either restate the point on behalf of colleague or see if they can speak a little louder.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that update was for information purposes only, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder to receive the update. Councillor Strachan, Councillor Barkley, and that is for the recommendation that we receive the report titled Civil Marriage Services, and I think we look forward to learning, Ms. Workman, in the new year if those ceremonies can be performed outside of municipal hours. But the motion is on the table. Is See no other questions or comments. I'll call the question. Are we good, Councillor Wilson? Okay. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. So we've already dealt with our planning development matter this evening. Thankfully, there was just one, and that was in regards to the noise exemption bylaw that has now passed through the consent agenda. So we will go to Parks, Rec and Culture, for which we have 2 items this evening. The first being Riverside Park, and I know we have a presentation, and who's delivering that? Okay. And thank you to Mr. Dyke, who is here this evening, interrupting a long-awaited holiday to support the presentation of this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to point out that Mark Guy was to be here tonight, but unfortunately Mark tested positive for COVID. And so Mark is at home right now recovering from COVID. So I'm going to do my best to fill Mark's shoes on the outline.
I wonder, Gary, if you could speak closer to the mic, I think it will help Doreen. I know you're typically soft-spoken.
So that's right. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Never been told I can't be heard.
Just let me check with Councillor Sullivan. Are you hearing Mr. Dyke, Councillor Sullivan?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going to be a bit of a 2-part presentation, Your Worship, and members of council. So I'm going to do an introductory. We're going to try and not delve into, initially in our presentation, delve into the elements of the project because they're well known, they were well publicized. Joe's here to help us with that if council has specific questions on parts of the scope of the project. I'll do a bit of an introductory, and then Mr. Ognorende will do the outline of the financial plan if that meets with council's purpose today. So I think I'd like to start out by identifying, as most are aware, this is a significant capital investment for our community, and it's an attempt to modernize our recreation facilities. There's been very limited investment in recreational facilities in this municipality since the ice pads were built in this building in 2004 or 5, I believe, when that was done. And the Riverside project has been a very important one that we've worked on hard over a number of years, given it's what we deem to be a significant long-term community benefit with its development. As noted in the report, the project was been identified in a 2022 budget to the amount of $1.5 million is what was the original budget estimate for the project was, 75% of which would come through the development charges that have been collected on growth across the municipality over the last number of years, and 25% out of our various municipal reserves, again, that Femi will get into as we go forward. This is the true vision for this project is it creates a full 4-season recreation amenity for our municipality in the center of our municipality. You know, splash pad, modern pool house, refrigerated ice surface for the thing which is needed in today's climate. As the outdoor rinks are usable for about 3 weeks out of the year without the refrigerated surface to them, as well as being fully adaptable in the summertime with the splash pad, basketball courts, ball hockey, things of that nature. I think it's, but importantly, when you look at the new pool house or the new recreation house, if you will, it's fully accessible with washroom facilities, access points, that which we currently don't have, which is very key for us, and we'll get more into that as we go forward. And I think that's an important part. Unfortunately, we came forward similar to a number of our projects going forward, and this isn't exclusive to us. This is provincially and financially, national implications with respect to inflation. And the supply chain issues hit across on various supplies, particularly in projects like this that are very specialized in nature. There was a significant impact on costing. And as we put the tenders out and came in, the prices ranged, I think, from $3.7 million to $4.5 million going forward. When we received that information back, staff went back and reviewed a number of options available to council. The 3 things we looked at were, 3 basically is A, don't do the project, B, reduce the scope of the project, and C, phase the project over multiple times, or 4, I guess the 4th one, B, is proceed in its full scope and mandate as going forward. When we looked at reducing the scope of the project, you know, it would, if you take certain elements out of it or reduce certain elements of it, it actually has a greater impact on the whole, in the sense that it takes away accessibility elements, it takes away usability elements. You get away from taking away the pool house. Now you have an old pool house trying to suffice on to support the rink, the basketball courts of that nature, and our current one doesn't meet the accessibility requirements as we go forward. But also when you look at taking things out like water recirculation. Right, the traditional way of splash pads, where you just dump the water into, you use the water once and it was gone. So it gets away from council's goal with their strategic plan about the sustainability elements of going forward. The greening, if you will, of our operations would be lost in that area as well. And when you get into, and therefore taking those pieces out, you significantly reduce what we deem as the long-term community benefit of those elements of the piece by taking those out. Looking at the phasing of the project again, that's just cost deferral. We'd pay for a portion now and try to bring things in over next year or next 2 years. And just the way, in looking at our trending going forward, there's absolutely no guarantee that the project just doesn't get more expensive. And also would have some logistics impacts because you're tying up Riverside Park and construction on multiple years versus the 1 year going forward. So there's that societal impact as well on Riverside Park. And so based on that, and based on what staff feels is the importance of this project to the community, we immediately discounted not doing the project. We kicked that one out early. But we also started looking at, okay, how do we bring the entire project forward using the full scope of project without deviating from what was approved by council, what was seen by the public, but also being fiscally responsible in how we put it forward. And what we've been able to come up with is we've developed what we feel is a financial plan for your consideration tonight that will utilize existing budgeted money, as somebody's going to talk about, is the reserve funds, but also from some debt financing pieces as well. But using other existing budgeted monies and the retirement of debt to offset the new debt charges that ends up in a net zero tax increase as we go forward. So we get the full scope of the project. Yes, it is payable over 20 years, but we're not having to go and actually directly impact the tax rate to realize the full value of the project, which we couldn't do elsewise. So with your indulgence, Your Worship, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ogunrunde to walk us through the financial numbers piece of it as well.
And thank you. And Councillor Sullivan, just checking in that you're doing okay?
Yes, thank you very much. I can hear fine.
Okay. So I'll just ask Mr. Ogunrunde too, just for the benefit of Councillor Sullivan, to make sure you speak directly into the mic, because that will ensure she has good audio. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so as part of the financial considerations the staff went through when we were evaluating the Riverside Park project, just alluding to what Mr. Dyke had mentioned, in the budget we had a sum of 1.5 million, of which 75% of that amount was supposed to come from the DCs, and 25% of that was supposed to come from the reserves. But instead of the lump sum draw from the DC reserve, we're considering, or we're recommending, that we reduce that amount to 500,000 instead. And then the first 3 annual payments of the debt will be funded by the DC reserves over 3 years. And then also, some of the existing loans in the municipality's debt schedule that will be maturing by 2026 will allow for us to bring in the principal and interest payments of the Riverside project into the budget. So what this means is that the tax base would have a net effect as a result of the maturing loans. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight for council and the public as well on this slide the list of the loans that we've identified that will be maturing before or during the 2026 financial year. So we have the NGMC down payment loan for 193,000, the rural roads loan for 34,000, the fire communication system loan for 21,000, and the public works grader loan for 19,000. So this brings a total of 269,000 roughly every year that is already in the current budget and is estimated to continue going on, in future years. So with the maturity of all of these loans, it allows us to be able to accommodate the Riverside project loan if it's approved by council, and without adversely affecting the tax base as a result. Next slide. So on this slide, I just want to walk council and the public through how we got to some of the numbers that have been identified in the report. So as Mr. Dyke alluded to, in the budget for 2021 and 2022, we had a combined sum of 1.5 million, of which 25% was coming from the reserves and 75% from the DC reserve. And so far, year to date, we've expensed about $161,000 on the design and pre-planning phase of the project. This allows an additional sum or not an additional sum, but a balance of 1.3 million. And other considerations as part of the project that have to be highlighted is a grant that was successfully received to help with the cost of the project to the tune of 455,000. We've received other sponsorships from the Sense Foundation and Enbridge at $50,000 each to the tune of 100,000. And as a result of some of the benefits that the Water and Sewer Department will be receiving, they've already allocated some funding from their reserve to the tune of 40,000. So this is a total of 595,000 that is going to be used to help fund the project going forward. Next slide, please. So speaking about the construction cost of the project, what staff is recommending as part of this report is to go with Brun Construction Limited for an amount of 3.7 million, and offsetting that cost against, sorry, one slide back. So offsetting that cost against all of the funding allocations that were highlighted in the previous slide results in a gap of about 1.8 million. But staff's recommendation tonight is that the balance of the committed reserve spending after the actual spending from 2021 and 2022 results in 214,000. The other considerations of the grant, the Water and Sewer Reserve, and the sponsorship from Enbridge and the Sense Foundation results in 595,000. And then the lump sum from DC should be 500,000 as opposed to the 1.125 million that was in the budget previously, which would require a $2.4 million amount that needs to be financed. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we're showing how that amount will be financed over a term of 20 years, resulting in the first annual payment of 12 months being 261,000, and this will represent the highest amount of the term of the loan. And just going back to the loans that I had highlighted as would be maturing in the next couple of years, this amount is lower than those loans combined together. So if 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025 is funded through the DC, in 2026, we're able to build the principal and the interest payments into the budget without adversely affecting the tax base. Next slide, please. So just to summarize and recap, the highest amount for repayment of the Riverside Park loan, principal and interest, will occur in year one, which will start from 2023. The repayment amount will continue to reduce over the term of the loan. And what this structure allows us to do is to not have a full draw from the DC reserve in year one, but instead have a half draw and then be able to fund the principal and payment over the first 3 years of the loan. And after, in year 4, we are able to bring that principal and interest amount payment into the budget to replace the maturing loans and not adversely affect the tax base. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay. I'll just go to Councillor Sullivan, who I believe, Councillor Sullivan, you were able to hear most of that?
Yeah, I heard most of it. I do have some questions, so whenever you're ready for questions.
Well, why don't we start with you, because you're on the phone and you're Parks and Rec Liaison, so you can go first.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Mr. Dyke and Mr. Ogarendi for the presentation and for all of the background work going into figuring out how we can make this go forward. So one of my questions, and perhaps I missed it if you did explain it, with respect to the lump sum coming out of the development charges, which was like the original plan, in the presentation that the document I have, it says debt financing will reduce the lump sum amount to be withdrawn from DC reserves. And that was under financial implications. So I'm not exactly clear what that means. Does that mean that you will be financing that $500,000 instead of taking it from the DC reserve? And if that's the case, I'm not sure why. Does it mean that we would earn more in interest by keeping that in reserve, more than we would be paying for borrowing costs on that money? That's what I wanted to clarify, and if you could just help me understand that, please.
I'm going to have Mr. Dyke answer it because I think you may be able to hear him better.
Just quickly, so what it means, instead of taking the $1.125 million directly as a lump sum out of the DC reserve to allow us to spread out our DC money over multiple projects instead of all into one, we're recommending we only take $500,000 out of the reserve and then debt finance the balance using the DC reserves to pay the financing costs of the balance of the monies. So it reduces the impact on the capital reserve, but still uses DC money at a lower rate, at a slower rate than taking it all at once. It just allows us to be more flexibility in the future use of our DC reserves on other projects. Femi, did I miss anything?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next question then is, this was all based on an interest rate of 5.5%. Would that be locked in for the entire term of the whole 20 years, or is that possible that it would go down and we would, is there possibility of paying it off sooner and reducing the financing cost?
I'm going to go to Mr. Ogunrande, and
Okay,
he can
through
take a
your
crack.
worship.
Just make sure you speak into the mic so Doreen
Yes.
can hear you.
So the plan here is, as part of the recommendation tonight, is for council to authorize staff to issue an RFP. And the idea here is that we have a very fair and robust process in terms of evaluating competition in terms of the rate, right? So the rate will be part of the consideration for that, as well as other covenants of the loan. But the 5.5% that was put in the report was just a placeholder in terms of worst case scenario. But definitely when we're considering all the proposals that will have been submitted at the time, we'll definitely be looking for a much lower interest rate.
Okay, sorry, can you, Nancy or,
Yep.
Worship or Mr. Dyke, can you summarize his response, please? Because it was a little...
I think what I understood Mr. Ogunrande to say, and Mr. Dyke, correct me, is that they're going to issue a request for proposals in terms of which financial institution can best offer a very competitive interest rate for the term of the loan, which is 20 years. Mr. Ogunrande emphasized that 5.5% is sort of a worst case scenario for the term of the loan, which is not 2 years or 5 years, but in fact 20 years. So from that perspective, in fact, Mr. Ogunrande suggested that the interest rate over that 20-year period may be below 5.5%, but certainly I think your expectation, Mr. Ogunrande, is that it wouldn't be higher.
Well,
Okay,
it could be higher.
And then with respect to that and having the second part of the recommendation, is this not time sensitive in terms of finalizing the contract with the successful bidder? Do we have additional time to do this, or can that be done separate?
From a timing perspective, I mean, our timing with respect to the low tender is relatively limited. I mean, we're running up against them holding their prices to now. With respect to the logistics around the financing part of it, there is some time on that because we'll be doing the bulk of our debt financing on a back-end piece of the project. We don't need the money right away. We're going to back-end finance the bulk of the work, which is going to transpire between 22 and 23. So yes, there will be part, and that will be part of Mr. Ogrande's job in going out and seeking the money and finding the best rates and best terms we can going forward with the financing part of the project.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that explanation. That satisfies all my questions. Thank you.
And Mr. Ogunrande, I think you wanted to emphasize something on interest rates?
I was just going to add that usually in a structure like this, you tend to see interest rates go up and down, but over the term of the loan, we kind of look at what the average is, and we expect it to be lower than the 5.5%.
So that was an estimated average, understood. Okay. Okay, other colleagues, I see Councillor Strachan's hand and Councillor Barkley.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Mr. Ogurinde. I guess my concern regarding financing is that interest rates going down aren't just a concern, it's when they go up and they stay up. And, you know, given what we've seen over the last little while, interest rates have peaked, although things are probably shifting now. I guess the question I would have is that what assurances are you looking for from financial institutions to be able to maintain an average? Are you looking to lock something in? Are you looking to create some sort of maximum? I know that's probably unrealistic when it comes to a financial institution, but I know that when we look at what our budget is and what the impact is, and we say there's no impact, it's maintaining a current level of debt that we, I guess, had hoped to alleviate ourselves with in a few years as well. So it will have an ongoing impact, and if the interest rate is something that then makes matters worse, I could see that being a concern from a taxpayer's perspective. So are you able to elaborate a little bit more when it comes to that sort of proceedings that you're looking to undertake with the financial institutions?
Yeah, through Your Worship. So usually for municipal entities, we usually get the best interest rate because we're seen as a low-risk entity. And usually they consider what the financial position of the municipality is as part of the consideration for setting an interest rate. At this point, it's kind of an open mind situation in terms of what the structure of the loan would be. Would it be best to go into a fixed term rate over 5 years and then renew at that rate, or look at a variable rate that kind of changes year on year, which will then be determined by the market primarily? It's not clear right now what the best scenario would be. We would have to kind of wait for those proposals to come in and then determine what the best structure is based on the responses we receive. But given that, you know, interest rates will have most likely peaked for this year and are not likely to go up again, like worst case scenario, we're probably looking at the end of the year before we see another interest rate rise. It seems like the best time to, you know, go out and actually start considering proposals, just to make sure that, you know, whatever decision we do or council approves based on the financing is the best situation for the municipality.
Thank you. If I may just follow up. So effectively, we're looking at this as if you're shopping for a mortgage for your home. You know, you lock in for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, you may have a better rate or you may have a worse rate, correct?
That's correct.
And then when we look at this, and we're looking at the timing, I understand what you're saying about the timing of it being probably looking good right now, better than it may have in the last year. But the term of this loan is 20 years, right? So it's a fairly long term, and, you know, not being able to figure out what the crystal ball is going to tell us for, 5 or 10 years from now. So I guess my only comment on here, and I realize you've already answered my question, is just that we would want to be informed through the process what things are looking like as far as the most favorable plan and so on, so that we could perhaps follow up on this conversation and be better informed. The financial side of things is always tricky, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes, so I appreciate the level of detail that this has provided so far.
And if I may just add to that, Councillor Strachan, through Your Worship, basically as part of the budget process, it's one of the documents that will be included going forward as part of the budget package, which just shows a schedule of all the municipal debts that are existing at every point in time and what the interest rates are attached to all of those debt, what the principal payments would be for the year, what the interest payments would be for the year. So council will be informed at every point in time when interest rates are changing or, either going up or coming down.
I appreciate that. The level of transparency on that side of things would be appreciated. I know I've had conversations with folks in the community. I know I've asked you about them as well, that not understanding exactly where those those different interest rates are and what the impact is. So thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Barkley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Ogarande. First of all, I'd like to thank him and the rest of the staff for putting together a creative solution, which dealt with an issue with cost overages that, as Mr. Dyke said, every municipality has been struggling with. Most of my questions have been answered in terms of how this all works. I know from the financing of the municipal center that we were locked in and weren't able to refinance, and it wasn't a particularly good arrangement. So I'm encouraged that by 2026, some of that debt will be retired, which will enable us to take on more. There's nothing wrong with debt financing, but I guess it's a question of the interest rate. So knowing that we're going to have some flexibility and some notice of how this is going to be financed in the future is encouraging. I guess my next question is just something that wasn't too clear in the report, and that's got to do with the phasing of the project. Like, are there certain elements of this project that are more volatile price-wise? And I guess I'm looking at Mr. Peshnek or Mr. Dyke. Are there certain parts of this project that were much more volatile and we saw increases? Because labor costs, equipment costs, or maybe some specialty items are the supply chain is driving the price up. I'd just be curious to know.
Just with respect, I'll let Joe speak to the different elements of it, but I think from a phasing standpoint, they're interrelated. So it's not like you can pick one to do and then do one later. I mean, they have to be done in a certain order. But the piece we're looking at and what we've seen, it's an overall inflationary impact on construction, but there's also product inflations as well. Anything regarding your steel, your concrete, specialized features that would go into an operation like this are the ones that are greatly hit. Some of the we were seeing inflation of greater than 50-60% on certain products. In the construction side of things as well. That's not even talking about the labor side of it. That's just the actual product piece. But maybe Joe.
No, I take your point, especially when we're talking about an all-season, not an all-season, but an extended season ice rink. We can't build it without the refrigeration and then later on add refrigeration. It just does not make sense. But yeah, I'd be curious about where we are in terms, to delay any phase of the project, if it could be separated from other elements, I guess is rolling the dice in terms of what prices might be a year from now. And certainly I know we've been talking about revitalizing Riverside Park for 10 years now. I was part of the stakeholder group that looked at the original plan, and I feel we're compelled to get the ball rolling because it does have benefit to the community for at least 20 years. But Joe, if you can shed some light on where some of those not outrageous, but I guess typical.
Yes, Councillor Sullivan, you're having a hard time hearing?
I am having a hard time hearing.
Okay.
I think it's Councillor Barkley and you guys.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's both of us now. Yeah, I'll summarize it and maybe the mayor can repeat it. Like, where did we see the most cost overages, Joe?
So with phasing it over several years, you're going to see increased mobilization costs because you're going to be doing the same aspects over and over. Like for the civil works, getting the underground infrastructure there, you're going to have civil crews there. Then if you pause and you start with the foundation, you're going to have to mobilize with civil works again. So if you phase it, you're going to have mobilization costs kind of doubled or tripled throughout the process because you're doing the same works and then breaking down, then you're starting again and breaking down. So that's some of the drawbacks with phasing it.
So Joe, and I just want to repeat that for Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Sullivan, were you able to hear Joe? Okay. I think, and Joe, just to be clear, what you were saying is to remobilize labor, right? The individuals who are partly contracted and maybe partly staff, you can clarify, who would come in to do the work. We'd be sort of having them come in over and over to do aspects of the project versus getting them to do it more or less all at once. And to that end, you could see increased cost or sort of paying for labor more than once because you have to bring them back onto the site for a period of time. Is that correctly stated?
Exactly. So through you, your worship, if you had just like an excavator, for example, if you brought it there to do the underground works, like the civil works for water, wastewater, you completed that, and the piece of equipment went to the next job, and then we brought it back in 6 months to start with the foundation. Just the cost associated with mobilizing and breaking down that's some of the drawbacks.
So
Plus,
it's really the cost of retaining equipment, right, and the human resourcing to do the work to make sure that all elements of the park, right, are completed. Councillor Sullivan, what Joe was saying is it becomes expensive to continue to bring them back time and time again if you phase the project into various stages.
Yeah, and also there was a,
Thank you. I guess that would also mean that if it was phased in, there would be more disruption in services that are available for the public, for our residents.
I believe that, Joe, you can speak to that.
that's correct. I was just getting to that. So that there is the service level issues, and you get into the pool programming during the summer months when you have contracting crews on site. It impacts mom and sister watching brother at the pool. So there's a lot of logistics involved with that. So if we hit it hard and fast, it won't impact many park services.
Councillor Sullivan, were you able to hear that? Yes. Yeah. And for users and service levels. Joe was just suggesting that the longer drawn out the project is, the more disruption there is for families and users of the park.
Yeah,
Councillor
that's great.
Bartley?
Yeah, no, thank you, Joe, for explaining where some of the danger lies in phasing it in. And certainly Mr. Dyke spoke to, you can't separate some elements from the other elements. And while interest rates are volatile, costs are volatile as well, but at least we'll be able to check in on the interest rates every so often and hopefully have the opportunity to refinance at cheaper rates or more competitive rates. But as far as construction goes, like we're in for a penny, in for a pound, we've got to get it done. Otherwise, they really go through the roof, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson? Nope, you're good? Okay. Councillor Sullivan, I'll just go to you one more time in case there's anything else on your end.
I think my questions, I just want to express how much I appreciate the opportunity to being part of this meeting. I know it's disruptive and it's not the easiest to be doing it by phone, but I appreciate the efforts that have been made to allow me to participate. Thank you.
Okay. We have a resident in the community who I think wants to ask a question. It's a bit atypical for us to do it midstream, but why don't you ask your question and we'll see if we can answer it now, or we may wait until after council has considered the motion. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry to interrupt then. So I was wondering, is there a construction timeline for this project? And then will challenges financing the project contribute to a delay in the redevelopment of Riverside Park?
And what's your second question, sorry?
So is there a construction timeline in existence, like a start
Understood.
date for shovel in the ground? And as a follow-up to that, would any challenges financing the project contribute to a delay in that start date?
Okay. So Joe, just in terms of construction timeline, and then we'll go to Femi for financing.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So right now the tentative schedule looks mobilization late September with final restoration works early June of next year, early to mid-June, like for the pool season of next year.
Okay, and we'll go to Mr. Oguramandai just for the financing piece.
Through your worship. So the plan right now is to utilize the other sources of funding through the reserves, the grant, and then use the debt financing as the back end portion of kind of finishing the project at that stage when the costs start to get into the much more bigger phase.
Okay. Good. Good. Okay, no problem. Okay, certainly from my perspective, having been around in 2012 and 13, around when there were some early discussions and community engagement on Riverside revitalization, obviously the considerable work we did as a council in 2018 to pursue a Parks and Rec master plan, where once again crucial upgrades to Riverside Park were identified as being incredibly valuable to the community, including making Riverside Park into a 4-season facility where washroom accessibility as well as change rooms and an upgrade to what is a 50-year old antiquated pool structure was deemed to be valuable, certainly helped to inform my enthusiasm for this project. I know sometimes these the revitalization of parks is sort of seen to be only beneficial to a youth constituency, but I certainly, in my experience here in North Granville, I've seen many different age groups benefit and call for improvements to our parks and rec amenities. And I think there might be as many grandparents who end up using splash pads and outdoor ice pads as they support the caregiving of their grandchildren as the parents themselves. But obviously, Riverside Park is North Granville's oldest park, I believe, and certainly its biggest. So it is strategically located in the downtown, and as we've seen other municipalities endeavor to build splash pads and outdoor rinks. Of course, we have a couple in our own municipality, but none that are refrigerated. It certainly occurs to me that seeing some of these upgrades proceed, I think would represent an increase in the quality of life of many of our residents. I did want to note, Mr. Ogarande, and I think Mr. Dyke, we do from time to time finance debt. That was clear from the list of debt financing that is already in place, from everything from roads to fire safety equipment to fire hall. So this is no exception to finance a capital project. It happens from time to time, certainly given the list that you provided us with, and I'm sure retired debt that we don't even know about as this council. Is that right, Mr. Ogarande?
Yes, through your worship. Yes, we do finance a lot of capital projects and purchase of capital equipment. Although the ministry still sees the municipality as a low debt municipality, we want to continue to remain that way. I think it's the right way to go, but we have financed capital projects in the past.
I'm understanding you to say we are understood by the ministry or the province of Ontario to be a relatively low debt municipality.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. So we've obviously managed financing in a very prudent way up to now, and you don't see that this represents a significant shift.
No. So in terms of how the ministry views it, from the ratio perspective, it will not take us over the limit.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Starkey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since you opened up the conversation regarding the financial situation, I just wanted to say that I guess from what I've heard from a variety of residents and from my own perspective, the level of transparency has increased over the years about where the funds are being spent and really in the details about things like the interest rates and so on, and where the debts are, coming up to their end of their life and where things are coming in. And so I think that that's been very helpful in understanding exactly where the tax money goes and so on, because if we get too far out in the level of granularity, I think that then it seems like a lot is being spent and nobody understands where. So appreciating what you've said previously about seeing those interest payments, what the interest rates are and all of that, I think that that's sort of another level that we can make more readily available to residents and to public, anybody who would like to dig into that, because I think that from my perspective at least, that's been very helpful, and overall it results in a positive reflection of where the money's being spent and not necessarily always just negative money spending, period. So I appreciate that. So no question for you, just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Councillor Strachan, for those comments, and to Councillor O'Sullivan and the rest of my council colleagues who I think have certainly watched the evolution of this project. It's not the first time we've talked about it. Certainly, really from the moment we were elected, we really wanted to ensure that we did justice to what some would consider North Granville's central park, just by virtue of its size and its history and the valuable role it plays in the community. So to the prospect and opportunity to see some of those updates made to the park and new amenities introduced in a fiscally responsible way, I think is certainly very, very exciting, certainly from my perspective. So with that in mind, council colleagues, we do have a couple of recommendations on the table, and I'm trusting Councillor O'Sullivan, you can still hear us, and that is, you can hear us okay, Councillor O'Sullivan?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Approve the awarding of the Riverside Park project to Braun Construction Limited, subject to the legal review of contract agreement, other relevant documents, and authorize the Chief Financial Officer to issue a request for proposals for the debt to venture financing portion of the Riverside Park project. I'll look for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Starkian. And I just...
I will second it then.
Okay, excellent. I was going to ask that because I know you're our Parks and Rec Liaison. You might want to embrace that opportunity. So that's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Sullivan. So any other questions or concerns, comments? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Good. Okay, no opposition, so that carries. And thank you, Mr. Dyke, for stepping in, and Joe, Mr. Peshnik, for stepping in on behalf of Mr. Guy, who wasn't able to join us. The other comment I'll make quickly is we see so much commercial development on County Road 43, and once again, I think investing in Old Town Kemptville represents a lot of benefit for what is often considered to be the heart of our community. So good to see it move forward. Next on the agenda this evening, we have the Maplewood Hall renovation project, yet another project that unfortunately has been hit by some inflationary impacts. And who's presenting that? Mr. Peshnik, is that right? Okay. And I'll just encourage you to speak into the mic because, again, I'm not sure Councillor Sullivan can hear you very well. Councillor Sullivan, if you can't, could you please interrupt, and we'll try to, perhaps Joe can come and speak in my seat if Councillor Sullivan can't hear you. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for having me this evening. The project before you is the Maplewood Hall rehabilitation project. The one proposal received from Heritage Grade initially came in at $303,618.68. Staff went back to the one proponent with our $150,000 budget in mind to ensure we can get some essential works done to the project. In consultation with the director, Guy, and the Heritage Grade staff, we created a short list of projects that were essential. Those included the copula inspection and repair, front entry and egress to the facility, so the steps and railing, and the rear steps and railing repair. Future works that were included initially in the project will be budgeted later on at a future budget cycle. Next slide, please. The 2022 budget item deferred from 2021. So initially in 2021, the $50,000 presented in the budget, the project went out for a bid in 2021 and it came over budget. Staff went back to the drawing board. In late 2021, we requested budget prices for the 2022 budget cycle. We allocated $150,000 based on a preliminary budget price from Hubbard & Co., a local heritage restoration company. Heritage Grade was the only bidder, and again, their methodology was a little bit different than Hubbard & Co., and that's the price difference, along with market increases and supply chain issues. Next slide, please.
Doreen, are you hearing okay?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. Joe, just be sure to speak right into the mic. Okay. Thank you.
Again, the bidding process, it closed on May 19th. Heritage Grade was the only for $303,618. Again, the project was the front steps, railing, walkway replacement, and accessible steps. Accessible railing, sorry, the copula inspection and repair, and the soffit and fascia repairs. Next slide, please. The Maplewood Hall repairs and rehabilitation project promotes accessibility, health, and safety for all users, completes the necessary restoration for the sought-after heritage building and used by residents of North Grenville. And this would be to see the completion of one of our capital projects for 2022. That'd be all, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on the matter.
I'll go to Councillor Barkley, and then Councillor Sullivan. If you have anything, I'll go to you before the rest of council. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and hopefully Councillor O'Sullivan can hear me, but the Mayor may have to condense and abridge my question and the answer. So, Joe, thanks again to staff for having a creative solution to what is, volatility in terms of prices and labor and costs. And when we're talking about heritage buildings, we're talking about special treatment. It's not your regular renovation. My question is about heritage grade. Everyone is familiar in this region with Hubbard and Company, and they'd be the logical vendor to do the work. How do you go about qualifying vendors for this kind of very specific, tricky work?
Based on their proposal and the attached references for the jobs that they've completed in previous years, we have a fairly lengthy reference list that we're in communication with. They are fairly big projects that Heritage Grade has completed in the past. On the Capital Block in downtown Ottawa, they're fairly big profile jobs that this firm has completed. So if reference checks complete, they're a good firm to work with.
I have a follow-up, but perhaps we should bring Councillor O'Sullivan along.
Councillor Sullivan, you're still hearing okay? Great. Beautiful. Go on, Councillor Barkley.
Great. So again, I think we couldn't delay work on Maplewood Hall any longer. So the solution of having to go back to Heritage Grade for a requote, to have them work within the budget that we had allocated back last year, based on quotes at that time, which you covered all the work. Can you tell me what work we are not covering this year that we'll have to budget for next year? It's quite a long list, and it's all work that needs to be done, but what's missing?
The majority of the works would be completed this year. For the exterior rehabilitation, the works that would not be completed this year is the stone repointing and the window restoration protocol.
Based on the engineering reports, was the roof needed any repair or maintenance? Do you recall?
The report that we received from Hubbard & Co. In 2019, it spoke to increased ventilation. The condition of the steel roof was in good condition at the time. It just needed some more modernized air ventilation, and that would be achieved through the softened fascia repairs this year.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I too understood that a new roof was required. So great to understand that that is no longer necessary if that ventilation is put into place. Councillor Sullivan, anything from you?
No, I'm also happy to hear that it's not a new roof that's required, and I think we do need to invest in protecting this heritage building just to keep it from further deterioration. So something has to move forward for it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barkley.
This is a somewhat related question to Joe, and I don't know if you have the answer. There was an engineering report upgrade for the building right beside Maplewood Hall, which is the former Township Hall. Do you know what the status of that is?
Through your worship, Councillor Barkley, the contracted works are being completed now with the firm. They're currently in the preliminary works of the on-site work. Up to date, they've done the septic inspection, and they've coordinated the designated substance report. Structural on-site still needs to be done, as well as the well.
And the report of which you speak will give us some real guidance on what needs to be done to the building and to the site itself, to also preserve, right, what is the former Old Township Hall, but a building of significant value, heritage value to the community. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that report will come in this fall? Is that what I'm understanding?
That's the intention, yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, council colleagues? So, Mr. Peshnik, with should this recommendation pass this evening, you will be able to activate the specified contractor ASAP to get moving. Is that right?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
And you would expect the repairs to be done when exactly? Or the
end-
work slash repairs?
Yeah, the work is hopefully to be done this fall. The only issue potentially would be the painting, which may have to be done in the spring, depending on how long the woodworking takes into the fall. Just for the application of the paint products, it's hard to do when it's below zero.
But the safety and related issues, you can get out of the way this fall?
That's the intent, is to do this fall.
Okay. Okay. All right. Certainly, I think the Community of Oxford Mills, certainly, and the Community Association in Oxford Mills has been very eagerly awaiting these improvements. So great to see that we were able to work around the current budget and get some of it tackled. I know there's been concern expressed and a real appetite to see Maplewood Hall, not just well preserved, but well utilized for the decades to come. So the recommendation, of course, is that we authorize the Chief Financial Officer to transfer $5,067 from the Recreational Reserve Fund for the Maplewood Hall renovation project, approve the award of contract for the immediate restoration items for Maplewood Hall to Heritage Grade in the amount of $155,067, and authorize the Director of Parks, Rec and Culture or his designate to execute the contract on behalf of the municipality. Councillor Barkley? And I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Sullivan?
Yes.
You wish the second? Excellent. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That passes. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, once again. So that passes unanimously. I'll move on. Nothing under emergency and protective services. No correspondence this evening or other business. I do understand we may have a notice of motion, so I'll look to that now. Councillor Barkley has raised his hand.
Yep, thanks. I've got a notice of motion to direct staff to draft an amendment to Bylaw 07-21. That's a noise bylaw that allows the Director of Public Works to waive or I'm sorry, that's a noise bylaw that we just passed.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm behind here. This is deals with the transfer station, 07-21, that allows the Director of Public Works to waive or discount land transfer tipping fees under special circumstances, and for staff to develop the parameters for exemptions in their report to Council. I can read that again because I misspoke.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so again, to direct staff to draft an amendment to Bylaw 07-21 that allows the Director of Public Works to waive or discount land transfer tipping fees under special circumstances, and for staff to develop the parameters for exemptions in their report to Council.
Okay. So as
Madam
that,
Mayor, can you repeat that, please?
do you want to give it to me? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah,
she's hearing
sure.
you.
Here, let me rip it out.
I'm just going to read it on Councillor Barkley's behalf. Councillor Sullivan, because I'm not sure that you're going to be able to hear him for a third time.
Maybe the clerk could read it.
Oh, she has it? I can read it. Okay, so Councillor Sullivan, this is from Councillor Barkley, notice of motion to direct staff to draft an amendment to Bylaw 07-21 that allows the Director of Public Works to waive or discount land transfer tipping fees under special circumstances, and for staff to develop the parameters for exemptions in their report to Council. Could you hear that okay?
Yeah, I could hear that. What's the background to that? Is there an example of a special exemption?
I believe in conversation with the Salvation Army and Habitat for Humanity, the potential to waive tipping fees may have been requested or discussed. Councillor Barkley?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but usually we give background when the motion comes to Council,
Okay.
but I'm happy to do that. Yeah, in conversation. Yep.
Sure, okay.
Yep. We can wait till the next Council meeting.
Indeed. So, Councillor Sullivan, more context will be forthcoming. Notice of motion is simply to provide notice of motion. So, but feel free to follow up with Councillor Barkley.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that's our notice of motion this evening. Thank you, Councillor Barkley. And then moving along, we are just left with introduction and consideration of bylaws, and I believe we've done that. Ms. Workman?
We have one that needs to be passed, Your Worship.
Okay.
And that is that council approve and enact Bylaw 6922 to amend Bylaw 50-12, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Grenville for the zoning of lands located at 2469 Bedell Road. Council considered this bylaw on August 10th, and this is the formal passing.
Okay, and that was for the planning matter where I believe the individual in question was seeking permission to proceed with an agricultural building for the growth of hemp, if I'm not mistaken. Have I?
Correct.
Yes, my memory serves me as correct. Okay. Colleagues, so what Ms. Workman is telling us is we did not formalize the bylaw that evening, and she's asking that we bring that motion forward this evening.
Correct.
Does anyone wish to move the motion? Councillor Strachan? And I will need a seconder, Councillor Barkley. And again, this subject was the focus of a particular planning matter for which there was much discussion, and council ultimately approved the proposed use as recommended by the Director of Planning. So I do believe we have a motion, we have a mover and a seconder, and I will look for any comments at this stage. I did abstain from the motion last time and will this time, but I'll call the vote for my colleagues. Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification, are we simply formalizing the decision that we had already made this, but it was not recorded? I guess I'm wondering, because I thought we had already done this part, so I'm just missing a key part here, sorry.
So the decision was already made, sorry, Your Worship. The decision was made to move forward with the bylaw, and this is just the formality of approving the bylaw.
And how was the initial decision captured then?
As presented by the director, and I can pull up.
We approved a recommendation, but not a bylaw?
Correct.
Okay. So any other questions in regards to the matter that was addressed at the planning meeting?
Discussion amongst ourselves about whether you want a recorded vote or not. I'm not requesting one at this point in time, but if the mayor has abstained, then...
I'm just noting that I abstained last time, and I will this time. So.
Okay, then I'll request a recorded vote then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Ms. Workman, I'll have you do a recorded vote.
So that council approve and enact bylaw 69-22 to amend bylaw 50-12, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Grenville for the zoning of lands located at 2469 Bedell Road. Councillor Barkley.
Yay.
Mayor Peckford.
I'm abstaining, which is effectively a...
Councillor Strachan.
Yay.
Councillor Wilson.
Yay.
Councillor O'Sullivan.
Yay.
And that motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We appreciate it. And then finally, I think we are at a period of questions for any member of the media or our community. Any questions? Come on down.
Jennifer Westdorp, the Kempville Advance. I just have a few questions concerning the Riverside Park project. So I looked online, and there was a press release sent out by the municipality on November 17th, 2021, that stated that the total cost of the project was $1.5 million. So now it's $3.7 million, so more than double in the last 9 months. So what's happened to drive that cost up?
I'll have you speak to that, Mr. Dyke.
Thank you, Worship. Primarily, it's inflationary costs on construction, on products, labor, similar to a lot of the projects we ourselves have endeavored over the last number of months, where we've seen a significant increase in capital works projects, and it's consistent across the province and capital works going forward. It's just the result of the inflationary times we're in right now is the bulk of the piece. is the bulk of the inflationary cost.
Okay, yeah, I asked because my understanding is that construction costs have leveled out at this point. So I figured in the last 9 months, that's a bit, anyways, so perfect, thank you so much. So you mentioned, actually it was Femi who mentioned, the deferred costs wouldn't impact taxpayers. So where is the annual payment actually coming from?
Through your worship, so we have existing loans in the municipal budget and books right now that will be maturing in 2026. So the plan is to finance the first 3 years, fund the first 3 years of payment from the DC reserve, and then in financial year 2026, we build it into the budget to replace those existing loans that will be maturing in 2026.
So when you say build it into the budget by replacing loans that have now matured in 2026, where's that coming from out of the budget until 2042?
So right now it's already in the budget, and it's been paid for through the tax base. So when those loans mature, it creates a space or availability to take on additional payments. So basically what will happen is those old loans go out of the budget in 2026, and then the Riverside payment for the Riverside Park project comes into the budget. So what this means basically is that the net effect would be zero.
Just for clarity, so we're using existing budgeted money, repurposed from one project to another. It's no longer needed for the retired debt, and we're using that money for the new debt, so it doesn't result in a need to create extra space in the budget, which essentially happens through a tax rate increase. So we're eliminating the need to raise taxes by using the retired debt numbers.
Okay, so that annual payment, however, is coming out of taxation.
It's money that's already been it's already money that's already been raised from taxation, so it's not creating, you're not having to collect new money for it. That's the benefit of using a retired debt.
So it's being collected now, and instead of ending in 2026, it will continue until 2042 from taxation.
Yes, but it doesn't result in a need for greater taxation. I think that's the important point, is it's money that was raised already and included in the budget, so it wasn't collected year over year or increased year over year, that money existed. So when that debt is retired, you have, as Mr. O'Grady said, there's an X number of dollars sitting there that's now is unassigned. We're now reassigning it from the old debt to the Riverside Park project. So that money continues forward without having to raise more money to cover the debt costs for the Riverside Park project.
Reassigning and extending.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So was a portion of this project always slated to be financed? I had read in the press release that it was supposed to be 1.5 million paid for over 2 years. So I'm assuming it was never supposed to be financed.
No, I don't think that became evident as a way forward until we saw the extremely high amount of the tender. Is that your understanding, Mr. Day?
That's correct. It was just based on the size of the project or the escalated cost of the project. As we mentioned, through the inflationary costs, and this is a method by which we can continue with the project without having to further deplete our reserves or negatively impact the tax rate.
And when was the estimated cost developed? In what year?
I would have to defer to.
I think it predated me. Joe, do you know when that estimate was brought forward?
The $1.5 million, I would have to defer to the director, but during the process of Architect 49, they kept us up to date on the costing for the project. That was during the COVID pandemic, though. We've just seen increases.
It was the preliminary design phase. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
That's my understanding, is when we authorized the preliminary design.
That's correct.
That costing was brought to our attention, certainly.
That's correct.
Yeah, I thought it was 2020.
Yeah, I feel like it may have been the latter part of 2020.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a question for Gary. With the upcoming election, my understanding is the council will move into a lame duck period where significant financial decisions won't happen. Is this decision to finance this $3.7 million project going to be deferred until after November 15th?
No, this current council is not in a lame duck portion right now.
Okay.
They are perfectly able to make this decision today. And it will move forward with, coming through this council meeting today, the project will move forward based on a decision of council.
So why is council not in lame duck?
Because greater than 3/4 of the council resubmitted their papers to run for office. There's a secondary lame duck period which happens after the election, depending on what the results are. You can go in lame duck again, depending on how many are returned or not returned.
Oh, okay, my understanding
There's
was
two.
started unless it was 75% were guaranteed to be back on council. That was my understanding.
No, it's the potential to come back.
Okay,
Right. So
I had a different understanding of how that worked then.
as 75% filed their papers to run again, we don't fall into the first lame duck period, which was
Okay.
after nomination day, and after election day happens, depending on the number returned, you can enter into a second lame duck period.
So is this council going into a secondary lame duck period then?
That won't know that until after election day.
Okay,
So the first lame duck is specific to the campaign period, and
Okay.
thankfully, Mr. Dyke, who sits on the executive of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, was able to help us understand, because we had the same question, can we make this decision,
Yeah.
given that the fact that nominations close? And Mr. Dyke was able to give us more clarity on what our responsibilities are during the campaign phase. And then it's subsequent to an election, depending on outcome. We could find ourselves as a newly reconfigured council in a potential lame duck.
For clarity, we verified that we had from a legal opinion with respect to our status. So just reconfirmed where we're at.
So we did our due diligence on this one.
okay, perfect. So this decision today that you're making to go
Holds.
move ahead with an RFP, it's not a decision to actually do the financing. It's a decision for them to come back with quotes?
No, it's actually a decision to proceed with the project. The RFP is just actually to determine the lender.
Okay, so this is going ahead. Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for paying attention. All right. Anything else from anyone? We're good? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. So then we'll move to confirmation bylaw, and that be that bylaw 7022 to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on August 30th, 2022 be adopted and passed. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Barclay, Councillor Wilson, thank you. And I'll just call the vote on that one. All in favor? Confirmation bylaw?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. And then just a motion to adjourn, and that is at 6:27 p.m. on a very rainy Tuesday, August 30th. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Barclay? Okay, actually, I'll recognize Councillor Sullivan as a mover and Councillor Barclay as the seconder. And that, again, is a motion to adjourn at 6:28 p.m. All in favor, please. All right, non-debatable motion. Councillor Sullivan, you can return to your camping. I hope you didn't get super wet.
No, I'm in my car, but I'm going to get wet. Thank you very much for making this possible for me.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you for taking time out of your holiday, and thanks again to Mr. Peshnek and Mr. Dyke, who came in to support the discussion under somewhat extraordinary circumstances. So thank you.